Alrighty, and we're recording. So tonight's guest is Jimmy Turner. That is Dr. Jimmy Turner. That is in Ph.D. Jimmy, thanks so much for coming out.
Dude, thank you for inviting me out. This is awesome.
So I first met Jimmy at I think it was the USCCA instructor certification, and it was taught
Yep.
by Citizen Safety Academy, Akil Kadir and Tiffany Johnson. And the thing that really kind of blew me away about about you was just how absolutely comfortable you were as far as like leading instruction and as far as coaching is concerned. um, you have a massive amount of emotional intelligence. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in this space and like how you got started with emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So I'll start on the firearm side, and it was kind of by accident. Um, I'm located in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the reason why it looks like I'm sitting by a campfire is because I am. My youngest son just came home from college today, and he's in the house watching the grandbaby for me while I'm doing this. So I decided to take advantage of my back porch, and it feels great out here in Chattanooga. Um, Now, all that to say, there's no real training hubs around here. We've got some people who come through from time to time, but there's no range or real group that's just really committed to training the way somebody like Top Gun is, or some of these other places we go to. So I was really struggling to find places where I could go take a class that wasn't carry permit or armed security guard. I mean, that's pretty much all that was being offered. So I have a range membership at this beautiful range in Hickson, Tennessee, called Shooter Supply and Range. Just recently remodeled. It's beautiful. If you're ever going to be in the area, I highly recommend you go check it out. You won't be disappointed. And I'm talking to the general manager, and he's walking around wearing one of those red NRA instructor shirts. And I said, "Hey, when are you going to start offering something besides carry permit around here?" And he says, I'd be glad to if I had somebody who was certified and I could actually kind of turn loose to teach something. I said, well, what do they got to be certified in? What do they have to do? And he says, well, they either have to be an NRA certified instructor or a USCCA certified instructor. Well, my wife was with me, and she's overhearing all this. And so she's immediately online on her phone looking. And when I get done talking to the store manager over there, she goes, hey, so there's a USCCA certification in Murfreesboro at the end of July. And this is like mid-June. And I said, okay. She goes, I went ahead and signed you up.
That's
I said,
so
all right.
awesome.
All right. Well, I guess I'm going to go do this then, huh? And it's that idea of somebody needs to do this. I'm somebody. I guess now I get to go do this. So prior to that, the only firearms instruction I had ever done was just friends and family on just some one-on-one stuff. They knew I liked to shoot. They knew I was decent with it, and they'd be like, "Hey, will you teach me how to do this?" And I'd say, "Sure." And we'd go to the range, and I'd work with them for a few hours and teach them the basics, and that was it. So when I got to citizen safety in Murfreesboro, the teach back portion was kind of unfairly easy for me because by trade I'm a training facilitator. It's what I do. I do corporate training, I do one-on-one coaching, I do all sorts of training. I'm a public speaker. I have the privilege of being able to travel and speak at conferences and do that. So I was not worried about the teach back portion of it at all. For me, it was just I need to make sure I know the content before I jump into it. So I did all the pre-work I was supposed to do. I was prepared for it, and when I got my assignment, I just jumped up there and did what I do. So I was really good with that. So that was how I ended up in firearms instruction. I wasn't looking for it, wasn't planning on it, but here I am. And since then, I really dove headfirst into the training community. It has no doubt been one of the most welcoming communities that I have been to in any career field. I don't know of anyone who has ever honestly tried to make an attempt into this community and said they felt like they were pushed away. Even the people across town are supposed to be your competition. they're sending people to you and you're sending people to them, and you're hanging out together. And it's like, we're not competition. We're just two people who do it differently. And that's been great. And, when I got to meet you up there, it was incredible because, I mean, first of all, we obviously have to be brothers because we're both Marines. So like that
Yeah.
immediately just meant it didn't matter who else was in the room. We were connected. That's just the way that works. But I was so impressed with your level of skill, your humility, and just how easy it was to get along with you. So I feel like you've become such a good friend because you are such a good friend to probably everybody you meet. And I know I was talking to Ak when he was in town earlier this year, and we all agreed. We were like, if we ever meet somebody and they're like, I don't like Mikos, we immediately are not going to like them because we don't know what their problem is. Like, they got issues. Um, Now, as far as emotional intelligence, so I'm going to give you a little bit too much backstory on this. When I was in high school, I dropped out. My junior year, my best friend, Star, uh, came out of remission from a very rare form of very aggressive cancer. And I spent the last 6 to 8 weeks of her life at her bedside, both in her home and then when she was moved into the hospital. And so that meant I wasn't going to school. And so when she passed, I went back to the school and they said, well, we're going to hold you back your junior year. You're going to have to repeat it. You can't make it up at this point. You just missed too much time. And I said, well, I'll show up as much as I need to, but I'm not going through all that. And when I turn 18, I'll just sign myself out. And that was what I did. So that next January, I turned 18. That day, I walked into the school office and signed myself out of school. Drove down the road to the local state college, signed up for the next GED class or GED test, uh, took it, and was done. As far as I was concerned, I was done with school and all of that. Well, fast forward, to where I'm 30, and I've just left working in law enforcement on the correction side, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with life. I'm kind of clueless. I know I don't want to be in that sort of work anymore, but I really don't know what I want to do. So I'm talking to a recruiter, just like a corporate recruiter, and he says, "Do you know about the post 9/11 GI Bill?" And I went, "I know about the Montgomery GI Bill. Is it the same thing?" And he goes, "No, no, no, it's totally different." He says, "They actually pay you a stipend to go to school." I'm like, "Wait,
Yeah.
so I get to go to school and they're going to pay me for it? Sign me up." And
Yeah.
so
They paid me too.
I did it. And so at 30 years old, married with two kids, I'm going to college. And, when you're 30 and you haven't been hanging around 18 and 19-year-olds, you think you're still young until you go hang out with a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds and you're like, wow, I am old. So I finished my bachelor's degree. I go through a master's program because I had enough left on my GI Bill to do all that. And one of the school executives comes to me and he goes, "There's this PhD program we really think you should apply for. And it focuses on organizational management with three different concentrations. You can do education, you can do church ministry, or you can do organizational leadership, organizational management." I'm like, dude, I'm already a high school dropout with a master's degree. I'm okay. Like, I don't have anything I got left to prove. I only did the master's because I had enough left on the GI Bill and I found a program I could be finished with and like 14, 15 months. And like, I'm good. I'm not here to be the lifelong uh, academic student. I had already started a nonprofit by this point that I was running full time, and I was consulting with several agencies, and so I'm like, I don't have time for going back to school, especially for a PhD program. Like I'm just this like old redneck boy from East Tennessee. I what what we PhD what? So I for a few weeks I'm like pushing him off on this. Every day he's hitting me up about it. Finally he comes to me and he goes, "Look, we'll waive the application fee You got nothing to lose at this point. You just turn in all the application stuff. And if you get in, then you can decide if you want to do it. And if you don't, you don't. No problem. I'm like, fine, if it'll get you off my back, I'll just do it. So I turn all the stuff in. And this
Fine,
is
I'll do your
April or May.
PhD.
Yeah, right. So this is like April or May. Well, then it's like July. I'm sitting at the house one day and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, but because I used to get those a lot, especially when you work in the nonprofit world, there's always the chance of a potential donor calling you. So
Yeah.
I answer it, and it's actually one of my professors from my master's program. And he too was a Marine. And so we're chatting and everything just kind of seems casual, like we're just catching up. And he goes, well, the reason why I'm calling you is because I'm part of the selection committee for the Ph.D. program at the school in the Center for Leadership Studies. And I went, man, good for you. I'm really glad that seems to be working out for you, because he'd come from another university. And I'm like oblivious at this point to why he's actually calling me. And he goes, well, I'm not calling you to tell you my news. I'm calling you to tell you yours. What's my news? And he says, well, you were unanimously approved for selection to the next cohort of the PhD program.
Oh, man. Unanimously
And at this
approved.
point, yeah. So at this point, I had done a lot of soul searching, a lot of time in prayer and thought. And I'd said, if I get approved, I'm just going to accept that God worked the wheels to make it happen, and I'm going to follow through. And if I don't, I'll thank God for it, and I'll be fine. So now I feel like, it's like, okay, I've got to kind of stick to my word to myself, because that's really where integrity comes from, is how honest you are with yourself and the things you commit yourself to. And so I did it, and I finished the program. But one of the things that really stuck with me, I love it.
Give me just a second. I got a gas story.
Special guest, Malcolm.
Hey, buddy. Hey. Come on over. There you go. Hey.
So,
hi, Malcolm.
And Dr. Jimmy, this is Malcolm. Malcolm,
I love
say
it.
hi to Dr. Jimmy.
Whee!
You see him?
Man, good thing he looks like your wife.
Say thank God, right? Can't have that much ugly going through the family tree.
Oh man, I love it. I love it.
He's so
He's
awesome.
adorable.
He's amazing.
Man, he sure is. That's
so I want to hear
cool.
more. Yeah, he's going to hang out with us for a little bit because, I'm sure his mom's busy. But yeah.
No doubt.
But,
so while I was in the program, one of the things that stood out to me was we had a guest speaker on our first day, and she used this term, emotional intelligence. And I went, what the heck is that? It was not something that was familiar in my wheelhouse. And thankfully, one of my very first classes was on emotional intelligence. And immediately I went, this is it. This is that thing that we're all grasping for, and we just don't know what it is. It's that ability to be that person who always manages to be successful with people, but nobody can explain why.
Yeah.
And so I latched onto it. Now, the great thing about PhD program is while you have a concentration of area, so in my case, organizational management, you get to pick the niche area of study where you want to do your research. And I knew emotional intelligence was going to be part of my research. So I got to spend 3.5, 4 years just deep dived into the world of emotional intelligence, everything from the pop culture books to the most esoteric research that was being done. And it was phenomenal. I loved every minute of it. The dean of the school, we asked him one time, we were like, how many other people's dissertations in our topic should we read? And he said, when you can print them all out and they stack as tall as you might have read enough of just dissertations.
God.
And we said, okay, so what about all the other research journals and the periodicals and the studies? And he goes, when you read them and you don't pick up new information, you finally read enough.
Huh.
So to that end, I still haven't read enough because I still feel like I'm picking up new information every time I read something new that comes across to me. So it's wonderful. I love every minute of it. Um, but my oldest son is on the autism spectrum, and so emotions for him were very atypical to my other son, who is what you would call neurotypical. And so recognizing that all these other people I've encountered in my life who struggle with understanding their emotions first, and then being able to manage emotions in an intelligent way. And I had the privilege of, I work with a nonprofit called Rise Up, and they work with at-risk youth and young adults. Started as a great mission working with foster kids who are aging out of the system to teach them life skills, and then
Hmm.
expanded and said, look, all youth in general need these opportunities. And so I got the opportunity to go speak at a local elementary school a couple weeks ago. And I was actually talking about emotional intelligence with a bunch of fourth and fifth graders. And you might think that's a little heady for them, but the first thing I did was I said, what does it mean to be intelligent? And you got fourth and fifth grade answers. It meant you're smart and you know stuff and
Yeah.
things like that. And I said, yeah, that's good. I said, but you know what? I think the Marine Corps actually gives us a better definition of intelligence than all the academic books. And it's the ability to adapt. I said, so once we learn to adapt, that is us acting on our intelligence. It's
Yeah.
reading what's going on around us and adapting to what the situation requires from us. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're really talking about our ability to adapt within what we're experiencing in our own emotions and the emotions of others who are around us. And it's a skill set. So it's not a trait. It's not something that some people have and some people don't. It's a skill like any other that people can learn. And that was what I found so wonderful about it, was because sometimes you hear about things that seem like on an emotional level, either you have it or you don't, like empathy. People say,
Yeah.
you're either an empathetic person or you're not. But the reality is, empathy is a skill that is simply being aware of what others are feeling, recognizing what they're feeling, having an understanding of what that feeling is doing to them emotionally, physically, mentally, and then acknowledging that that's what's going on with them. That's empathy right there. And that's a skill set. That's not something that has to be an inherent trait to you. And so being able to identify those things, and I recognized in my son and in others, wow, we can actually teach this to people, and they can better fit in with the people around them and be more successful because of it. And so that was how I got interested in emotional intelligence. So my entire dissertation focuses on understanding emotional intelligence
Yeah.
in the human services sector for nonprofits, and how it affected employee turnover. But one of the great things
Yeah.
about it, yeah, that looks familiar.
I'm still working on this thing. It's pretty meaty.
Yeah, well, it is a dissertation. But one of the fun things we learned is, when you look at the normative value of how we would score emotional intelligence to just the average person, leaders, especially executive level leaders in nonprofit organizations, tended to be head and shoulders above on their ability of demonstrating emotional intelligence to what the normative value was. So if you really want to see emotional intelligence in action, go start hanging out at some nonprofits and look at their leadership. And while it's obviously not going to be the rule for all of them, what we found was that with the overwhelming majority of them involved in our study, their demonstrated levels of emotional intelligence was far and above that of just the average person on the street.
Hmm. So that's pretty interesting. The idea that emotional intelligence, like portions of emotional intelligence, or maybe even just the whole kit and caboodle, can actually be taught. Like, I never thought about people, I never thought about the idea of, like teaching empathy. You know what I mean? Um, I mean, I always understood there were times I would learn empathy, like I would gain, but there weren't really times where I actually thought about how it was taught. So
So let's
it's
let's think
pretty
about this for a
interesting.
second. It's right now Eastern time at 7:36 p.m. And if I were to say to you, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. In that 60 seconds, I want you to write down every emotion you felt in the last 24 hours. This is an exercise that we do. Men, yeah, 6, maybe 8 emotions they'll be able to identify. Women, 10, 12, maybe 14 they'll be able to identify. What's most interesting about it is the only emotions people tend to identify are emotions that would go to an extreme. So it's happy, it's sad, it's angry, it's fearful, it's elated. It's something that really moves the meter a good distance. But what we don't hear, and actually, I actually heard this from a 4th grade boy, and I was so proud. What we don't hear is, I feel normal. I feel content.
Huh.
I feel like everything's going the way it's supposed to. We
Oh,
remember
that's
feeling
interesting.
pissed off. We
Yeah.
remember feeling elated. We remember feeling loved. We remember feeling betrayed. We don't remember just feeling normal, content, at peace. Because those we almost look at as sort of a neutral emotion, as opposed to a positive emotion, happiness, glee, joy, or a negative emotion, anger, fear, sadness. So by our very nature, we only remember the extreme emotions that we feel and not what we actually feel the majority of the time. So when we start thinking about that, then we can look at what somebody else is going through and go, what do you see in your behavior when you're afraid? You know, what is it that you recognize in yourself that other people would see that would give away the fact that you're afraid?
He's being a little
And then you
noisy.
start going, then you look at somebody else and you go, they're doing exactly what I do when I'm afraid. You have just entered the skill set of empathy.
Huh.
Because now you know what they're feeling, you know how it affects them, and you can acknowledge it in them to then be a positive influence and help them get through it. That's how one way we can teach empathy.
Wow. Like I've read a book about, emotional intelligence, right?
Right?
I can't even say I've read books there was I think it was Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I forget exactly who
Yeah.
wrote it. It's still over in my
Travis
bookshelf.
Bradbury and Gene Graves, I believe.
That sounds familiar. And
Yeah.
I still pick that up every once in a while whenever, I just need something and I won't even be able to put into words what it is. I just knew that I needed it, and that was the book that I needed to get it from. So for you to like sit here and write, let's say 132 pages about it, including works cited, and including like interesting charts and graphs and stuff. That to have that as your dissertation for your PhD, that shows a deep level of understanding about this thing. But you teach it on a professional level, correct?
Absolutely. So I work with an organization called GenOS International and GenOS North America. And Dr. Ben Palmer is the guy who actually created, so to speak, the model of emotional intelligence with which I most align on an academic and practical level. And I say it that way for a couple of reasons. One, I do believe that you have to be able to challenge assumptions to see if they're true. I believe that the truth doesn't fear a challenge. And I believe that if we can address this in a way where it's demonstrable, then there's a practicality to it that comes along with it. So on the academic side, that's where we're testing it. That's where we're going, hey, you know what? This is repeatable. We can witness it, observe it. We can set parameters around which we will see that it is or isn't repeatable. And the GenOS model of emotional intelligence fits that. The practical side of it is we tend to talk about it as what we call applied emotional intelligence instead of just emotional intelligence, because applied means there's something demonstrable about it. There's something that is in action as a result of it. And that's what makes the biggest difference for me, because anything else, you're really just dealing with a personality test of hypotheticals. But with what we do with the GenOS model, we're not looking at what you think you might do in a certain situation. We are looking at what you actually demonstrate based on the competencies that we believe exist in the set of skills that we call emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence isn't just a function. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of 6 different competencies that we look at, from self-awareness and awareness of others, and that's on the emotional level, to authenticity and emotional reasoning. And those are really important because they serve their purpose. And then self-management, and then what we call positive influence, or what you might say emotional management of others, where we're addressing it in a very positive way. So when you look at each of those competencies, they create the set of skills that are the profile that makes up emotional intelligence in an applied way. Because each one of those things are not just trait hypothetical ideas, they're actions that you actually have to demonstrate a level of adeptness for us to go, yep, that person is demonstrating emotional intelligence.
So how do you actually apply this into a classroom, particularly with gateway students? I mean, it's pretty easy to see how you can, manage the emotions of others, positive influence. As far as like how to basically sharpen your edge and then incorporate that into a curriculum, like what are the building blocks of that process?
So funny thing is, it's so much more scientific than people think. It's just the demonstration of it seems charismatic rather than scientific. And so what we know is that when people are experiencing positive emotions, our brains work better in critical thinking and being able to assess information and being able to make good decisions that are to their benefit, not just in the immediacy, but in the long run. We also know that negative emotions tend to narrow and limit our ability to think. Hence the reason why you hear people talk about making rash decisions in the moment while they were feeling a negative emotion. So if you imagine that your brain has a certain bandwidth, then negative emotions are limiting your bandwidth, whereas positive emotions are giving you the maximum opportunity to use the full bandwidth that you have. So when we deal with gateway students especially, and for those who may not know what a gateway student is, we're talking about before the beginner. We're talking about their first introduction to the world of firearms and the Second Amendment and what it means to us and the ability to defend oneself. And it's Ak and Tiff have this great slide in their Gateway Instructor course where it's a gate like you're going into a farm or a ranch. And they say, they haven't even made it on there yet. This is where they decide if they keep going or not. So what that means is we take an approach that might seem just being charismatic, where we lighten the mood with people. We make them feel good about being there. We demystify the gun so they're not fearful of it while they're in the class with you. We do everything to affirm that they're there for the right reasons and they're going to get what they want out of it. And so that's how we're tapping into it. So I have to be aware of what I'm experiencing when I go into the class, because if I'm experiencing negative emotions, I need to manage myself to go, hey, I need to flip a switch on this that says this is not the time for me to be processing those things. So I need to take on what I know to be the positive emotions that I can use while I'm teaching this class, because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the outcomes. I enjoy the process. I also need to recognize these people are coming in fearful. They're coming in sort of disconnected from what's going on. They're coming in with apprehension. to what we're doing in some cases. And so what I have to do is I have to make it at first less about the tool and more about their interaction with what's going on in the right now. And that's where emotional intelligence really plays its part. We have an entire module on just using emotional intelligence in a coaching context because we understand that emotions impact our behavior, our decision making, and our performance in all areas of life. So we have to recognize then that if emotions play that big of a part in everything that we do, I mean, what do you have outside of behavior, decision making, and performance? That every aspect of your life falls into those. And so if we're stepping outside of that realm, okay, I don't know what that is, but everything I'm doing right now is about how I'm behaving with you. It's about
Yeah.
the decisions that I'm making and how I answer my questions. And it's about the level of performance that I'm demonstrating on both my knowledge and my ability to speak coherently and with some sort of precision so people might understand what I have to say. So everything we do falls into those categories. So that means that our emotions are at the center of not just who we are, but everything we will ever accomplish in life. There's no such thing, with the exception of the pure psychopath, of the person who only makes rational decisions. Emotion is always a part of that. So if we go back to what I told the fourth and fifth graders, intelligence is our ability to adapt. So for me to be emotionally intelligent, I have to be emotionally adaptive to the group I'm working with, to the individual student that I'm working with. And that is emotional intelligence in action.
It makes me really want to dig into it a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like I want to read more. I want to. So right now, in my own personal journey, I'm working my way through your dissertation, and my goal is not only just to understand the topics that it contains, but also to use the works cited in order to deepen my own understanding, and hopefully to use that to better benefit my clients and my learners. Um, I think that will be worthwhile for a lot of my fellow instructors. I think that's where a lot of the industry is really kind of lacking, and I really didn't feel that way until I met you. So, there's a massive positive influence that you have on the people around you. So, I think it's really just kind of interesting. Let's talk about some of the other classes that let's talk about some of the classes that you're currently teaching and some of the classes that you may be working towards in the future. Okay, tell me a little bit about, like the work that you do in Chattanooga. It's a
Yeah,
practical defense training, correct?
correct. That's the name of the company, Practical Defense Training. Um, so I kind of work in two specific areas when it comes to firearms instruction. One is going to be that gateway student in the greater Chattanooga area. And for those who may not know, Chattanooga is in the southeast corner of Tennessee. So we're right on the Georgia line, and we're also right next to Alabama. We're about 2 hours from everything. 2 hours to Atlanta, 2 hours to Knoxville, 2 hours to Nashville, 2 hours to Birmingham. So we're this great central hub of places. But what we also know is that since the time of the pandemic, about a third of the people who moved to the area came from states that were very restrictive in their gun laws: California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois. So an overwhelming majority of my student base are these people who the only time they have seen a real gun in their entire life was on the side of a cop. So they this is a whole new world for them. And those gateway students, what I've done is I've got two primary classes that I market to them. One is called Get to Know Your Gun. And it's about a 3-hour class of nothing more than demystifying the tool. And that's what we do. Even if they don't have one yet, we're going to talk about revolvers. We're going to talk about pistols. We're going to talk about single action and double action and striker fire. And we're going to talk about the cycle of operation. I'm going to do everything I can to make that gun seem boring to them in a way to where they no longer see it as this sort of transcendent other thing from which they have to be afraid. And then we have one called How to Shoot a Handgun. All right, so you no longer have to be scared of the gun. You know how to deal with it safely. You understand what's actually happening mechanically with it. Now let's go actually use the thing. And so it's a real focus on just the fundamentals of marksmanship and really teaching people early on how to use a gun to hit the same spot each time that you want to shoot. And so we spend a lot of time on the range with that one. Now, the second side of it is, why do we have guns? Well, I mean, we can talk about being collectors. We can talk about being competition shooters. We can talk about just recreational use or hunting. But at the heart of the Second Amendment, it's about my ability to defend myself, because life is something that our Declaration of Independence says I have a right to. So if I have a right to life, then I have a right to defend that life. And so I want people to be able to use their handgun defensively. So one of the classes that we offer is called Am I Ready? And we say it's practical training for defensive shooting. At the end of the class, I don't answer the question whether somebody is ready or not. They do. And what we do is I've taken real life self-defense situations. And I'm grateful for John Correa and all those guys at ASP and gals at ASP for all the work they've done on putting that out there, because I can take what I see as common interactions in gunfights for the private citizen and go, hey, I can build a drill around that. And so we're using unconventional positions to shoot from. We're dealing with sort of standard malfunctions that they might run into and the need to be able to jump behind a column in a parking garage or whatever that thing is. So we have drills set up specifically for what we have been able to find were real life and fairly common real life situations, and build an entire day's class out of that. So that at the end of the day, I sit down with the student and I go, okay, the name of the class is Am I Ready? So after everything you've been through today, after everything you've learned today, are you ready? And almost every single time, the question is, I feel like if I had to do it, I could, but I recognize that I need to learn more and get better. And that's exactly the answer I want from them. I don't want them to walk out without confidence, but I don't want them to walk out so confident that they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm good, I got this. Because that's the person who's never going to train again. They're not going to practice because they think they've made it. But that's also why I'm not the one who's telling them, are you ready or not? I'm going, here's the conditions under which we see ready people survive. Now you've been through this. Are you ready? And they get to walk away. And it really doesn't matter what they say to me. It matters what they say to themselves when they leave that day.
Yeah.
And they start thinking about everything that they just went through. So those are the two primary areas right now that I'm working in. Now, you asked about future projects. And we got to admit we're cheating a little bit, because you're involved in one of my future projects where I am creating a class with your help and the help of several others on bringing emotional intelligence into an instructor development program. So we're going to look at these competencies. We're going to understand what they look like in action. And then with the help of several other people who have a lot greater expertise than I do in the shooting world, we're going to say, okay, now let's look at some real scenarios where self-awareness would have been really important for an instructor to have going into this class, where emotional reasoning would have been the right way for them to be able to manage what was going on in this class or in the coaching situation. So that we have this class where we can go to the instructors and go, hey, you know what? That thing you've been missing that you couldn't put your finger on, we've got it. And it wasn't just some whack job who got a Ph.D. who made it up. He employed the people who have more experience and better skill than him to develop this thing specifically so we can bring it into the instructor community to make it work for you. And so that's the passion of what I have going into next year. And now that I've finished up the last of my training classes that I was taking for this year, and we're getting through the holidays this week, next week, you and the others will be getting that final email that says, all right, let's jump into this. So we have something hopefully by the end of Q1 of next year to start launching and releasing to people. So I'm really excited about that. I know there's other people who are doing a lot in the field that may not realize what they're doing is emotional intelligence, but it's that they've picked up on competency levels to it, and they're teaching it in a way. But I think it's time that we make it explicit. It's time that we no longer, hide behind power skills and coaching dynamics and other things. Let's just call it what it is, and use the precise language that matters, and say, hey, you know what? We're emotional creatures, all of us. So let's learn to be intelligent about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. We need to be intelligent about it. We need to call it what it is. And I'm so excited. I am so excited for this program. I can't wait.
Me too.
So speaking of classes, right? Just wrapping up your 2023 training schedule, dude, you had a monster year. So
A little bit.
Tom Givens, the Rangemaster Instructor Development course, Akil and Akil Kadir, Tiffany Johnson, Citizen Safety Academy, the Gateway Instructor course. Let's see. There was a couple others. Help me out here.
So if we start back in January, my birthday is January 17th. I'll accept presents all year long. So if anybody, feels bad for missing it, that's fine. Send me an email. I'll give you my P.O. box. But back in January, my birthday present to myself was Ryan McCann's parking lot pistol. My wife and I, we drove out to Memphis, and you and I were going to hang out, but your wife had to have a baby, so we didn't get to.
You can see how that turned out.
I know. I'm thrilled for you too, man. I was so excited. So we took Ryan's parking lot pistol, which was phenomenal. I highly recommend, anybody who's got that "Am I ready?" question, go take his class. You'll really find out a lot about yourself when you do that. Then in May, I believe it was, I took the Rangemaster Combative Pistol, and this year Ock started teaching that for Tom, and we actually hosted Ock here in the Greater Chattanooga area at one of the ranges we work with, which is called Cohutta Pines. It's actually in Cisco, Georgia, just across the state line. Beautiful range. If you're ever in the area, come hang out with us there. So Ock came in, he taught that. He brought Howie Marbury and Tiffy and just great people with him. It was a great experience. Loved the class. Then in, I want to say September, we hosted Lee Weems for his trigger management class. Another phenomenal class. Had a great time. I don't remember when, but Citizen Safety and Ock with Jeff Boren also put on an active shooter response class up in Hermitage, and I got a chance to go to that, and that was another great class I got to take. Real great experience with that. And then I took, most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, Tom Givens and the Rangemaster Instructor Development course up in Nashville at Royal Range. And, I tell you, that class, there was something special about it, not just because you get to train with Tom, and, we had Ock and Jeff and great AIs up there helping, and it was a beautiful range. But even without specifically going into individualized coaching to improve performance, every single person there improved their performance over the 3 days of that class. It's just incredible the way that Tom can manage it. And then the fact that he can be on one side of 18 bays of range and see what's going on the other side. And you don't even know he's there until he's right in your ear going, "What are you doing?" Oh man, I've never seen somebody who seems to have an absolute omniscience to what's going on the range outside of Tom Givens. But yeah, so I think, you know what? I take that back. February or March, I took another intermediate pistol course from a FBI level, master level instructor who was in the area teaching that one. And that was fun too. So yeah, I think that's all of it, but yeah.
Yeah. Let's say hi to everybody.
Hi, Malcolm.
He's going to take his bath.
Nice. So yeah, it was definitely a busy year for training for me. Don't regret any of it. Loved every minute of every bit of the training that I was taking, and next year is going to be just as fun too. We're hosting a bunch of great guys. I'm still waiting on you to tell me when you're coming into town so I can host you
Yeah,
and
I have to figure it out.
finish filling it out. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to make this commitment to you. Okay, I'm going to come out here. I'm going to go out there to Chattanooga in 2024. I'm going to do
Outstanding.
that. I got to figure it
All your
out. I got
listeners
to
just
figure
heard
it
it.
on the calendar. Huh?
I said all your listeners just heard it.
It's true. So I have to. I'm going to write it down as well because so before the weekend is out, I need to put a date on this calendar. Um, no, I'm not going to give it the weekend because it's a pretty busy weekend, and
It
I
is
hate
a busy
bothering
weekend.
people. I hate bothering people about business on the weekend, unless they actually do business on the weekend. You know, if you're a trainer and you're on the range on the
How about
weekend,
by the end of the month?
end of the month sounds great. Yeah. So
Excellent.
I'm gonna put this on my thing. So
And if you don't, you owe me a bottle of Kraken.
oh, you about if I don't bottle of Kraken. So just to be sure, right? Just to be certain, because there's a context clue in there. Are we talking about like the spice rum? Or are we talking about some other
Kraken 94.
Kraken 94? Okay.
Yep.
I might just bring it out to you anyways. So,
I won't turn it down.
so I yeah, we gotta have that conversation. Um, but yeah, that is an amazing year, and I'm really really excited for what I get to learn from you next year, as far as the emotional intelligence as it relates to as it relates to firearms instruction. I seriously think that that's a major gap in the firearms instruction space that it really just is not being filled quick enough and has not been filled soon enough. We went through decades of, the hard nosed drill instructor style, my way or the highway. And I have serious problems about sending my mother to a class like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
you I think that the industry is coming around, but I don't think they know exactly how to do that yet or what that looks like. So if there can be somebody that can codify it, that can actually like lay down the groundwork and the framework of, hey, this is how I make this thing more inviting to my
Mm-hmm.
learners and to my clients. I think there's some definite value there, man. I think you struck gold.
Well, I hope so because some things that we know about people who have a high level demonstration of emotional intelligence. One of the things is that in work and life, they just perform better in everything they do. They tend to be more physically and emotionally healthy because that level of applied emotional intelligence just makes sense to them. These are the people who they don't call out of work because they don't need to, because they create the context and the environment that they need to thrive in. They're not waiting on somebody else to do it for them. The leaders who have those high levels of emotional intelligence, they don't deal with high numbers of staff turnover and those things that come with a negative work environment because they are cultivating that positive work environment that they need. We see that with people who have high levels of emotional intelligence uh, in the workplace. They tend to not just perform better, but they make more money. And so that's a good motivator for people. Uh, but one of the things that you'll hear people like John Correa talk about is emotional health. And it's like you see these people who they get into their gunfight, and he'll say, they had good emotional health. And really, what he doesn't even know that he's saying, except that I've talked to him about it now, is these are people who have high levels of emotional intelligence in the moment. When you look at those competencies, two of them that really matter are, I mean, they all matter, but two that are really important are emotional reasoning and authenticity. Here's the reason for that. One, emotional reasoning is simply about our ability to make decisions, understanding the emotions that we are feeling and the impact that it's having on us. So if I know I'm dealing with a negative emotion, but I need to make an important decision, I am taking note of that and then asking myself, if I wasn't feeling the way I'm feeling, what would my decision processing be like? So in that moment when somebody's put a gun to me or a knife or they're doing something that makes me feel like my life is in danger, I only have a split second to make that decision, but I still need to have the training and the foundation to where I can make the right decision in spite of the negative emotions I might be feeling. Secondly, authenticity. I like to jokingly but kind of seriously say authenticity is that one thing you can't fake. You're either authentic or you're not, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about authenticity, what we're really talking about is you being you with integrity and honesty to who you are, appropriate to the context you're in. So who I might be with you on a private phone call is still the same person that I am right now, appropriate to the context. There's things
Yeah.
we will talk about when it's just the two of us that we're not going to talk about when it's recorded and about to be put out on the internet for everybody else. It's between you, me, and the NSA, right? But so we can be contextually authentic to who we are based on what's going on around us. And those sort of things, when you're talking about training other people, all right, I don't have to fake being something I'm not to connect with people who need to feel more comfortable around a gun. I can be me, appropriate to my context, and use that to connect with those people. So, and that's why I said there's such a science to this that is sort of masquerading in charisma, and that's how we make it successful for people. And I am so excited to see how this develops in the firearms training community, because as you've noted, and the other people that I've talked to who are going to help me with this have noted, there once I started telling them about it, they were like, yep, that's that gap. We didn't know what to call it. That's it. You just nailed it. That's perfect. And the whole thing came about because of a very negative experience that I had. And and I'll just share it real quick.
Yeah.
I was playing range safety officer at a local range when somebody stepped off the line with a rifle and flagged about a dozen people with it. And he had just finished doing a mag dump. And I said, hey man, you're going to have to take that thing back to the shooting booth, keep it facing downrange. And when I stepped in front of him, he got violent. And so thankfully he didn't try to use the gun, but after jerking around with me for a second, it was, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill everybody in here. And so I managed to get him off the range. And after a few minutes of him being irate and acting out in the lobby area, we got him to leave without any incident. So when I got home that night, I was just kind of spitballing out loud with my wife about why did I handle it the way I handled it that made it very successful. And it was funny because I said, well, I knew what I was feeling in the moment. And what I was feeling in the moment was a genuine concern that this guy might pull a gun out and start shooting people. I mean, we're on a gun range. I recognized that he was acting out of an irrational anger, and I could make assumptions about where that comes from. I knew that to be me, one, I had to maintain control of the situation. Two, I had to maintain the safety of everyone there. And so that level of authenticity and the fact that I'm thinking about all of these things in the moment, there was that emotional reasoning that was going on. I also recognized that I had to stay calm because the moment that I started to match his aggression, something very bad could have happened. And so I needed to try and be a positive influence. Even if I can't change his mind about being angry, I need to at least change his mind about being here. And I need him to not be here anymore for his safety and the safety of everybody else. And as I'm talking this out loud, I went, wait a minute. That's self-awareness. That's awareness of others. That's emotional reasoning. That's authenticity. And I had just worked through all 6 of the competencies of the applied emotional intelligence that I teach other people. And I went, there it is. There is my anecdotal evidence. We need more of this in our industry, because that very well could have been a life and death situation had I not employed it the way I did. And I don't say that because I need to toot my own horn. It's not about that. We recognize it's a set of skills, period.
Yeah.
That the same way that a hostage negotiator goes, it's not because I'm awesome, it's because I was trained in a set of skills. I've been trained in a set of skills. I've developed that set of skills, and that set of skills, when used properly, work. So now let's make sure everybody else has access to that set of skills. No longer does it need to be that thing that we all wonder what makes that person different. It's here. Let's get to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you know, like, had you been educated in this? Of course you were. You were educated in emotional intelligence before that incident, correct?
Right. Yes.
And do you still think that you would have been able to resolve that incident peacefully if you didn't have the level of emotional intelligence that you have now?
Not at all. No, knowing who I was before I started to understand this. Remember, I mentioned I came out of working in corrections. Now, in corrections,
Yeah.
we use the phrase "talk down before takedown," but takedown is always an option. And so the moment that he started acting violently with me, the old me, the unintelligent, emotional me, was ready for a fight and glad to do it. And now I'm going, the only way I win this fight is if I don't get into it. So how do we not get into a fight, not just for my safety, but for his safety and for the safety of everyone else around us right now? And thankfully it worked out.
Well, Dr. Jimmy, you've given me 56 minutes. It passed by like that.
It really, yeah, did.
And I would gladly take another 56 minutes, but I want to be respectful of your time. Can you give me some places where, if my viewers and listeners want to ask you more questions, how could they get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. So we've got practicaldefensetraining.com is our company's website. You can reach me at info at practicaldefensetraining.com. So both of those are easy ways to get in touch with me. You can also go to drjimmyturner.com, drjimmyturner.com. So that's my other website for the more emotional intelligent consultancy side of the work that I do. So any of those would be easy ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. And are you on Facebook and YouTube or anything like that?
Oh, well, I have a YouTube. I don't really put much up on it unless I need it for my website, just as a hosting platform. But I am on Facebook. You can find me at practicaldefensetraining.com or Dr. Jimmy Turner. So both of those are available. I dabble with the Instagram, and every once in a while I look at X, and that's about the most you're going to get from me when it comes to social media.
All right. I'm gonna just so happened, like during the course of the conversation, I got like 3 different pages of notes, and this contact info I'm going to put on the description of this video and on the podcast, so that my listeners and viewers can get a hold of you. Just one more time, Dr. Jimmy, thanks a bunch for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, man. I feel like I'm just like in this surreal moment where I get to hang out with you on your podcast. Like I'm in awe of you, buddy.
You're awesome. And then also, speaking of people that are awesome, I just want to thank the people that are watching and the people that are listening to this podcast, because I want to thank you for your time. Your time is very valuable. You could have spent it with your family or at work, but you're spending it with us. And I just want to let you know how much we appreciate it. So
Absolutely,
thanks a bunch
totally honored.
Thanks a bunch for watching, and thanks again for coming on, Dr. Jimmy. Welcome to Memphis.